Hello and welcome to another edition of Seattle City Club Civically Speaking. I'm Alicia Crank, the Executive Director, and today I am here with Seattle City Council Position 8 candidate, Saunatina Sanchez. How are you?
I am doing great. I love talking about Seattle, so I'm really excited to be here and be able to do that.
All right, well, let's get into it. Why are you running? Why are you doing this?
I'm running because I have a passion for Seattle. As I said, I have been a kind of booster for the city since I was born, as far as I can remember. I have since I've been an adult, I've worked in a lot of different activist and organizing circles, including Cascade Bike Club and currently the Transit Riders Union. And I have done a lot of work at the street level in terms of doing mutual aid and direct service for my neighbors who are having kind of a hard time in their life. And from all of those experiences, I have developed a good collaborative style in terms of being able to get through a lot of the log jams that it seems our political system puts up. And so I'm really excited to bring my experience in sort of the private world into the public sphere and bring all of the experiences and connections I have into Seattle City Council.
So, what is prompting you to do it now as opposed to earlier or even maybe later? What's going on that made you said, I need to throw my hat in the ring?
Yeah. Actually, it was a lot of friends that asked me to run. I had been talking about the idea for a few years. And with the election last year, there were a lot of really great candidates that stood up for District 3, which is my district.
Mhm.
And I wanted to support the people who were running. And I didn't feel that I was really in a place in my life in order to commit to running for office, for applying for this job. And then this year, with the appointment that happened, a lot of my neighbors and friends, especially in District 2, asked me because they saw that the city council was going in a direction that they had been working a lot to change. So, in terms of economic policy, in terms of land use policy, there were a lot of people really concerned with, like I said, how the direction of the council is going. And they asked me, like I said, to bring my experiences and finally make good on all of my talk about maybe running for office one day. So it really was a kind of good timing for me, and I think the city, in terms of what I can bring, the experiences in my past and how I work with others in getting through the contentious conversations around really serious issues that affect us all.
So let's talk about some of your policy focuses, and they range from public safety to workers' protections. And a lot of this is front and center right now. Let's hit upon one of these that's maybe touching you the most and why you're running. What is it around transit? What is that kind of one hot button issue specifically for you that you want to hit on in this conversation?
I think that human services touches all of these things. And that's where I come into this work. I make sure that the issues that I'm focused on are based around the people who are going to be accessing the services, who are going to be delivering the services, right? We do have many people a part of our current process, and I don't think that either the people who are trying to help or the people who need help are really being properly supported by our system. And human services is, to me, all the things in our environment, in our city, in our infrastructure that humans use. So that includes transit, right? If we don't look at how people get around the neighborhoods, then how are we going to have vital neighborhood centers? If people who depend on transit aren't able to commute to their apartment or house from, the north end to the center of Seattle without, having to plan an extra 30 minutes or 45 minutes into their commute compared to somebody who drives, then we're going to have a lot more limitations in terms of who's able to participate in our public system. So that's really what I'd like to focus on, is human services, and how are we serving the humans that our services are supposed to be serving. Um, yeah.
So let's talk about. I made a comment about your hats before we went to to record here, and I would love for you to talk a little bit about, especially the helmet one, and I think that ties back into one of the things that you just talked about.
Yeah, so I have the Pronto helmet, and if you're a long-term resident of Seattle, you may remember our Pronto bike share service. It was municipally run, so that means that the city of Seattle were the people who were managing the system. So we had checkout locations, much like they still have, I believe, in New York, City Bike has docks that you can return bikes to. And that was very common. That was the standard system back when Pronto started. And as an inaugural member, like as soon as Pronto was announced, as soon as we were able to sign up for membership, I was on that train. I was on that bike.
Now, how
And
long ago was that? What year are we
oh,
talking?
wow, it's such a blur now, but I think it was like in the tens.
Okay.
So like, yeah, it may have even been earlier. No, it was in the tens. It was definitely like 2011, 10 or 11 that we were really working on getting municipal bike sharing. And that was an effort, again, with a lot of the organizations in the city, in terms of, I know Cascade Bike Club had, Bicycle Club had a lot of impact and a lot of advocacy work in getting that stuff implemented. And unfortunately, there were, political scandals, and it didn't last for long due to funding issues. And you're right, it does get back to what I was talking about, the human services and who is able to access the services that we are giving out to people, or we are providing to the public as public servants. So there were a lot of issues around where the Pronto bike share docks were located. It was, again, a sense of the people who were implementing the pilot project wanted to focus on areas that were more affluent than others, because it seemed like that those were the people who were going to actually, pay for the service. And it turns out that that is the opposite. And it usually is the opposite. When you have a public service like this, it's usually the people who have the least amount of resources, that they can't have their own personal bike or car, because they get around on transit. These are the people who mostly access these services. And I don't think the people who were implementing it really considered how people were going to be using it and who needed it more than anybody else. So there were a lot of missteps with Pronto, and I wear it around. I wear this helmet because it is a souvenir from that era, from the first municipal bike share program. And it's also a reminder to me about how we can better create these public service programs, how we can listen to the people who are on the front lines of the issue and actually implement good solutions that people want to support.
So I'm going to ask you about your campaign in general, but more around some of the reporting that I've seen come across on social media, especially when it came to when you announced. And I feel like the titles that came out were leftist, super left person running, and now we have this more conservative council, and this is just another feel good situation, but we are in a significant financial crisis. Um, how do you address that? And I saw one of the statements that you did have on your website around the budget crisis. And it's very general in the sense of saying, we need to trim some inefficiencies. And I think there are going to be people that say, give me an example, because it's easy to say that in kind of an encapsulated, format. But I want to give you an opportunity here to say, here are some of the specifics that I mean around trimming some of those inefficiencies.
Yeah. And what I like to go into is where our resources are being uh, directed, right? So trimming inefficiencies doesn't necessarily mean cutting money. It means figuring out what value we're getting for the money that we're spending. So, taxes are the resources we collectively gather, and then as in my view, being a public servant, it is my responsibility to listen to the communities and say, okay, we are wanting more uh, crisis care management. So why are we putting more hiring bonuses with the Seattle Police Department? Why are we giving more money to a department that people know shouldn't be in charge or shouldn't be responding to certain things? And we're not putting dollars and resources into services where it can solve the problem, it can help people. So one of the things that I like to say is like, are we actually funding what we should be funding? So those are the kinds of inefficiencies that I'm generally referring to. And as my website said, we're not going to find $200 million deficit money from those, transferring those around, because it's not about cutting services or cutting money. It's about making sure we're spending on the things that we should be spending money on. We do need more money. And I think that a lot of the initial pieces that came out about me focused on anti-tax or something, or and I'm like, no, I'm not. I never have been. I just don't. It hasn't been the focus of my advocacy in my life. I've depended on other experts in order to direct me to those kinds of issues. And since I've started running, I have delved deep into the budgetary issue, and I have always supported the Jumpstart tax. And I've always supported efforts to change our regressive tax structure into a more progressive tax structure. Sales tax is the ultimate regressive tax because poor people tend to spend more money on things than rich people. And so they are spending a higher percentage of their income and on taxes than somebody with more money. And what I like to say is like, why are we nickel and diming our way to a comprehensive and holistic service when we could be focused on something like the 2% Seattle capital gains tax, right? If we implement a 2% Seattle capital gains tax, we can wipe out our budget deficit. And this 2% Seattle capital gains tax, right, is only going to be focused on people who are making an excessive amount of money compared to the rest of Seattle, right? Yeah, I don't focus on budget issues, but I do pay attention to them when they come up in my life. One of the things that I work on is I am a member of the Community Roots Housing Board. I sit in the resident seat. So I'm a resident of Community Roots Housing, and I bring issues that affect the residents to the board and make sure that changes are happening to improve our living situation. I lost my train of thought.
Okay. Well, my next question. Well, maybe my next question will to a trigger for you, which is, yeah. You said that you live in District 3, and of course, this is a citywide space, and I'm sure there are going to be some people that are like, okay, you're used to being in one particular district. How will you speak for the entire area as opposed to just being focused in your particular neighborhood?
Yeah, and that did trigger my my thought because, as I said, as a board member of Community Roots Housing, I'm not just thinking about apartments in District 3 that are in our portfolio. I'm thinking of apartments that are in the North End, the South End, West Seattle, downtown. We have properties in every single district in the city, and I hear from residents from those properties about the problems that exist, and I bring those concerns on a regular basis to our CEO, and we try to make sure that those voices are elevated. And so the first thing I did as a board member was work to implement a resident advisory board, resident council, that would be basically at the equivalent level of the PDA, the Public Development Authority Board that I sit on. Because, as I said, the residents are the ones who are directly impacted, and they're going to have solutions that the people who don't live in the system won't be able to see. So that system, that the board, the resident advisory board, is currently being implemented. We worked with a consultant. We did a lot of interviews with other housing providers from around the country and in Seattle. Previous interview I saw, Plymouth Housing also has resident boards. And we really did look at all the different programs and see the best way to implement it. So we have a group right now meeting of residents from buildings, and they are writing the bylaws. Like, the residents are the one creating this advisory board so that they have the that the authority is there, that there's not it's not a separate entity. It's not like, a token to the residents. It is a decision-making body in our system. And that goes back to the budget question, right? I was alone on the board when as a resident, and I was asked to vote on a bonus for us, our CEO. And he does a good job in terms of making sure that our system is managed as well as he can in our current system, in our current, society. At the same time, he is making significantly more than our lowest paid employee, probably somebody on the maintenance staff, maybe a part-time employee. And what I asked the board was, are we actually looking at these compensation structures with equity in mind? Because a flat bonus for every employee is going to give more money to the CEO than it is going to give to somebody in a lower income bracket. And that then was a conversation that we were having on the board. So I bring the issues that I hear from my neighbors, and I make sure that I honor them and their trust in me by being a loud voice for them. And I credit my personal buildings tenant union with giving me that ability, because if it wasn't for my direct neighbors, I wouldn't have been able to join the board, as I do sometimes need some help with applications, as we all do.
So let's talk about, and we can't do civically speaking without saying, how do we engage with each other civically, right? And I think one of the things, in my opinion at least, when it comes to running for offices like this, and there's always, there's obviously a focus on you as a candidate, but I think we rarely talk about the fact that collectively this, you have to work together. There's no one person that, makes the decision and calls it a day, that there has to be collaboration. So my question to you is twofold. One is, have you connected with any of the current Seattle City Council folks that are on the dais right now? And two, what would be your priority or your stance around trying to work collectively, especially around some of these topics where some of the sitting city council members may not necessarily agree?
Yeah. In the past, I have worked with Morales' office. Very recently, the Seattle Renter Organizing Council, which is another group that I was an inaugural member for, we were working on a $50,000 budget item last year. We got it in. And it was for a Office of Renting Standards. So this is something that is supported around both residents and property managers, because both sides of that coin agree that our current conflict resolution, our complaint system, is not operating well for either side. SDCI is the current agency or the current department that is in charge of following up on all of these reports, and there's just not capacity there. And that's not the real purpose for the Seattle Department of Inspections and Construction. That just, it's mostly about construction, right? Permits, making sure that the people who build our homes are able to build them in a safe in a safe way for the whole community. And so what we did was we're like, well, maybe we should have an office much like the Office of Civil Rights, where it is focused on the people that are living in these buildings, not the construction aspect, but the current residents. And so I have a lot of experience, working in terms of having meetings and getting really specific policy ideas into the conversation. I haven't personally connected with anybody on council yet. I did organize a series of primary forums last year for the city council, and I was fortunate enough to meet uh, the candidates in that aspect. And so I know that people who are sitting on the council, like me, love Seattle, and we want to make it the best place possible. So I come in not with a confrontational personality. I don't think that that doesn't serve us. I'm used to being a part of a group of people, poor people, who are constantly, written off as not savable, or there's no reason that we should give services or think of people living on the street as people, because they're just gonna, waste away. And so being told that a group of people doesn't actually shouldn't be around makes me hesitate to talk the same way about people whose politics I don't agree with. And I get into the police accountability with that, right? Like, I know there are officers on the force who are trying to make a difference. And I'm not going to write off every single person who is working for an agency, because we do all have to live in this society. So what I do in terms of, collaborative communication, what I do in terms of collaborating with issues, is I come at people with, what are you passionate about? And I take that and I say, okay, you're passionate about that. Can you imagine me being passionate about that in this other way? Right? We all come with our perspectives. And I think when we take away the winner take all aspect, like, we have plenty of resources. So why are we fighting? We're all here to make Seattle better. So how can we figure out what we're trying to do for Seattle and work collaboratively, bring our skills to the table, and not put down somebody else because they have different ideas?
You are the only Saunatina I've ever met. So I'm sure that other ones know too. What is the history behind your name? What is the meaning?
It's a family. It represents my family actually very well. So my mom saw a piece of sheet music when she was a kid. Sonatinas for beginners.
Okay.
So musical term. It's a small sonata with sonatina. And my dad heard that, and I don't know if he saw the sheet of music, or he just thought it would be neat to have it even be more unique. But on my birth certificate, this was what was written: Sauna versus
Ah,
Sona. And so that was kind of a issue between my parents for a while. And but I got used to it this way, and I like that history of what both of my parents contributing to my name.
well, thanks for sharing that. Like I said, it's always kind of nice to learn like the little bitty things about what makes a person, or where their names came from. So I want to leave you with the last word, though. I know we talked a little bit about how you've been perceived in the media versus what it is that you really want people to know about you. So I'm going to leave you with that final word. Of everyone that's going to be watching this, listening to this, what is the one thing you want them to be able to walk away with about you, if anything?
I would like to express my passion for the city, for municipal issues. I have shown up at various meetings around design review, around transit infrastructure, around buildings. That I was a part of the coalition for public benefits when the convention center was being built, the new out addition.
Mhm.
And I know how important it is to focus really closely on how the people in the area where things are being built, right? For instance, that convention center, right? Neighbors made sure, a coalition of neighbors made sure that it wasn't just going to be a showpiece for outsiders. It was going to be an integrated part of our city, of our neighborhood. Downtown is a neighborhood. Right? People live downtown. And I think a lot of people from, the other districts from north and south, they forget that it is a home for people as well. So that's what I want people to take away, is that Seattle has been my home for my life, except for a brief period where I was in Fresno, because that's where my dad's from.
Mhm.
And, yeah, I've been working for Seattle. I have interacted with uh, people from all up and down the political arena, and the different work experiences I've had in terms of being in tech, being, working for disability outreach to help people get onto SSI and SSDI when they couldn't pay their medical bills, and working for the Seattle International Film Festival. These experiences all inform how I come to public policy. And I think that's what's most important, is what is the perspective that somebody's bringing. And I am bringing a wholly Seattle perspective to this position. I love the city. I've been a booster since I can remember, and I really hope to bring that energy to city council and make the city a more livable place for everybody. Yeah, 24/7, 365 bathrooms, I think really does encapsulate in parks. Sorry, 24/7, 365 bathrooms in parks, I think encapsulates my campaign, my vision, more than almost any other policy.
Saunatina, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I'm sure we'll see you throughout the summer as you run for the primary. And hopefully, if you make it past into the general, Seattle City Club is going to be hosting a city council debate in the fall. So hopefully, you'll be there in one capacity or another.
Thank
So
you
thank
very
you
much.
so much. And thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And this has been Civically Speaking with Seattle City Club. And we'll be back with more coming soon. Thanks so much.